Hello everybody, I am Brian Mullins the Fox for a previously unscheduled, off-the-cuff, Rant Archive exclusive Rant video. This one will only be about internal consistency and why it is absolutely paramount to anything as to establishing facts or proving claims of fact without going completely against what science is for and how it absolutely works. You have to be scientific to prove those claims, and do it so you can tell people who assume that science is where you just make up shit and then test it to shut the fuck up. There just simply is no making up anything, ever. Because if you're going to create a hypothesis and then back it up with evidence, do it scientifically and yes, consistently. And that's not to just immediately disregard any potential hypothesis as a conspiracy theory just because it sounds insane. But, alas, the vast majority of these so-called hypotheses are anything but and are absolutely insane, so you should discard them because there's no reasonable way to test them scientifically, or there's no reasonable doubt as to their inefficacy, the nature of those claims being outright false to begin with. For example, if someone nutty enough is claiming that the government can control the weather, but at the same time denies climate change and the fact that humans do impact the climate anyway, I'm gonna call him out for being a fucking hypocrite because you can't believe both things and it can't be both ways in the same sense at the same time. Pick one, people. For the second example on why internal consistency is paramount is you can't believe that there is a conspiracy to cover up the shape of the Earth and then refuse to do actual mathematics, study it scientifically, and actually coming to your own conclusions without covering up evidence at all at the same time. By your own retarded so-called logic, either you're part of a conspiracy or this conspiracy just does not exist because the Earth isn't fucking flat. Hell, for any other conspiracy just like the flat Earth, is the type of such where you can't possibly prove the conspiracy without being a hypocrite. But on the other hand, internal consistency is also paramount when it comes to, and yes, I'm saying this since the Roast Game Awareness Month or October is almost over, these families couldn't have possibly gone against their standards and not gone against their standards at the same time. It's only that they've gone against it from 98 to 2016. That's why food waste statistics would have otherwise been consumption statistics. That's why, if it hadn't have been for the roast game and the roast game era, I would have seen the average price of a 10 to 12 person Christmas dinner without having to do any math at all myself, or account for inflation to begin with. Because it would have otherwise just been there, and there wouldn't have been any problems or issues coming up. Because even if there were to have been a conspiracy like this, there's no excuse for covering anything up. Because there is no such conspiracy to cover it up. There simply had to have been this much of a massive issue to make calculating or accounting for the total price of a Christmas dinner between 98 and 16 impossible. That's it. Because any claim surrounding a conspiracy doesn't imply whether or not if it's true without evidence. Internal consistency is the guiding factor when it comes to a claim that does represent and actually accounts for reality. No matter what it's about. There is no abnormality in the sense where you can't account or compute for anything, much less meat production, how much they cost, and accounting for inflation. It's only how consumers behave that becomes the abnormality to explain what's really going on in reality, and not the other way around. So that there is no abnormality with reality itself. Throughout the past 2 years of doing research and accounting for everything, even updating some statistics to account for 1998 and 1999 when it comes to Hamway statistics, like I did in this year's multi-series about Christmas dinner, I have learned a hell of a lot, and I have enough experience to know how to account for such when it comes to meat production, prices, inflation, consumer choices, the basis of the said culture shock that caused the roast game to happen at all, and whatever happened to have caused it to end in 2016, and the 5 years before that, building up the premise and the basis for such claims so that when I officially put them to the test, I had the backbone and the body of work big enough to do so in the fucking first place. And that's why internal consistency is paramount. Because if you don't have that huge body of work consistently demonstrating the same point that you've been making for years, then you're fucked. And for the last example being when it comes to the Michelson-Morley experiment, the same one that tried to prove that the ether exists, and its main hypothesis is that the ether in question is constant and is not moving. Yet, when people started testing the experiment out, they proved that either this so-called ether is moving in contradiction to the experiment, or there is no such thing as ether drag in contradiction to both experiment and the hypothesis of said experiment, or the only answer, which is the third option, is that the ether does not exist. And that's about it. I have thoroughly demonstrated in both ways why internal consistency is paramount, and those who advocate the opposite of such should go fuck themselves, unironically. Because there is no reason to doubt the authenticity of someone or a claim that is being tested scientifically as to whether or not it explains what's going on in reality, whether if it's true or false, or, best of all, how. Unless if it's actually false and can't be tested. Not that there must be a conspiracy, because someone can't be fucked to do the actual math and read out all the actual numbers without being part of some alleged political or socio-political agenda. Because either those who allege that there is this mass cover-up by one person or conspiracy to hide the evidence, whilst at the same time delegitimize the supposed conspiracy by proving that this is evidence and you people try to cover it up at the same time, or you're part of that said either political or socio-political agenda and you're a massive hypocrite that just doesn't give a shit and wants to censor what they call conspiracy theories because they can't actively entertain such or try to debunk any of them. Because they're not conspiracy theories. Because moral fagging for the sake of moral fagging to push a political or so-called scientific agenda are anything but scientific. They're the antithesis of science as much, if not more, than the conspiracy nuts that are the antithesis of science themselves, but to push a completely different agenda thereby. So, with all that being said, I can't explain it any further because it should be this simple to understand. I'm Brian Mullins the Fox, signing out. See you next time.